Opening Bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers. Joining you guys once again this week to talk about some of our favorite prospects that we have for the first 5 rounds of the 2023 NFL Draft. In the first episode this week, we did the defensive side of the ball. Now we are doing the offensive side of the ball. So Connor and I, we have exchanged lists to make sure that we're not doubling up. So we're giving you 10 in total, our favorite players that we have rounds 1 through 5, at least as it stands right now. So Connor, how are we feeling today, my friend?
I'm good. This is a fun one, especially on the back end. You get into a couple different players that we don't get to talk about traditionally week after week.
Yes.
So this is definitely, it's that time of year. Everybody kind of puts their stamp on certain prospects that they're higher on than others or that they would bang the table for in the draft room. So I always enjoy these kinds of exercises.
There is specifically one player that I have as my 5th round selection that I was like, I must talk about this player because I love him so much, but there's a reason that he's probably going to be a day 3 player. So I wanted to give him a shout out, but this is going to be a very fun exercise. So of course we want to hear from you guys as well. We would love to know who you guys have as your favorite players, rounds 1 through 5 so far in this draft process, pre-combine, of course. So we're not going to hold you to it. It's not like we're gonna old takes expose anybody here, but these are just some players that we would love to give a shout out to. And just as we did for defense, this doesn't necessarily mean these are our number 1 ranked players at positions, and maybe necessarily the guys that we have as the highest player whenever these rounds are coming up. It is simply our favorite guys, the guys that I guess we would categorize as our guys in this class. So like we did last time, we'll save the suspense of me shouting out my guy in the 5th round for the very end, and we will start at the very top. Connor, I will give you the floor, my friend. Who is the offensive player that you want to highlight as your favorite round 1 offensive player right now?
Peter Skoronski. I mean, he is just the entire package in my eyes of what you look for in an offensive lineman. The fact that, he'll basically turn 22 when training camp gets rolling. So the age is there, the experience is there. He got there when Slater opted out and was a starter right away. So he's been starting as a freshman since 2019. So for a young prospect, he has 3 years of starting experience. When you look at, we loved him over the summer, Trevor, and then you look at what he did this year, and I know we haven't really gotten deep into offensive line on our previews this year, but Skoronski was great again this year. He never had a bad game in pass protection. He's been battle tested against guys like Hutchinson and Ajabo. I think he's a really, really good run blocker, especially on the move. He's got a thick lower half. He can generate power from that lower half. He's always looking for work. He's always looking to play through the whistle. His pad level is where it needs to be. He understands how to get leverage. I mean, he can handle his own scheme. He can handle gap blocking. There's not a lot. I look at him and go, man, that's going to be a problem. And the only thing you're going to hear about, because he's such a good player, is the arm length. And we don't even know where that's at right now. So if Skoronski really doesn't pass a tackle threshold for a lot of teams, I think he'll easily be one of the better guards in the league by year 3. Love this player.
Yeah, he is just a damn good offensive lineman, right? I mean, he had a 93.0 pass blocking grade this past year. On true pass blocking sets, it was barely any lower. It was 92.3. Zone run blocking grade was an 88. I mean, like this dude is just
complete player.
He is a complete player. And I hope we don't, I hope the NFL doesn't, I don't want to say nitpick, because I know why they're doing it, right? When you have smaller arms, it is less advantageous for you, especially when you get to go up against these NFL pass rushers that can really create some tough matchups for you with their arm length and being able to separate that way, especially when they're attacking from the edges. I get why it's I get why it's a preference, but I would not use the word threshold for Peter Skoronski with the arm length.
I wouldn't either.
That's kind of where I am. That's the best way that I can explain it. I understand the arm length as a preference, but there are some guys that are just good O linemen. And Peter Skoronski, to me, just screams that he is a good O lineman no matter what.
I think he's the rare first round offensive line prospect that can play all 5 positions. I really do.
Yes.
Which is wild to say. I think he could do it.
I think that's a great way to put it. I don't know how high he's going to go. I don't know if he's going to be offensive tackle 1, 2, 3 in this class, because Paris Johnson Jr. is very good. Roderick Jones, there's a lot of upside to him, right? These are good players. Maybe Skoronski ends up being closer to 15 than he does number 5 overall. But whoever drafts him, wherever they're playing him, I am with you. I have confidence that he's just going to be a damn good football player. So that one's a guy who we have talked about plenty. My offensive player, and I thought of this player immediately. And then I said to myself, okay, come on. Like, everybody, this is an obvious one. Is there somebody else that you could pick? And I thought about tight ends.
I'm glad you did it, by the way.
Okay, that's good. But like, I thought about tight ends, and I'm like, yeah, like I feel like my guy would be Dalton Kincaid, but am I gonna have him in the first round? No. If anything, he'd probably be a second rounder.
Because you're an adult.
I thought about.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding for everybody that likes Kincaid out there. It's just a running joke on the pod. No shot.
Me. I am me. That's me. He's talking to me. I thought about offensive tackles, and if I had to choose one, I'd probably pick Skoronski, and you already picked him. Quarterback, could pick one of those guys.
Slippery slope.
I could pick Bryce because he's awesome, but there's so much talk about Bryce. Wide receiver, I don't really love any of these guys at the very top. And that just brought me back to Bijan Robinson.
Let's go. There it is. The bad boys are back.
It had to be Bijan Robinson, man. I went back and I was reading my summary scouting report on him. One, I gave him an incredibly high number grade. This is one of the highest number grades that I've had in the last 5 years of how good of a prospect this dude is. My little summary of him can just be put in this way. A truly elite prospect. The holes in his game, if any, are more style preference than they are weaknesses or inability in one way or the other. One of the most complete prospects that I have ever scouted, and a player who, if healthy, will be a top running back in the NFL for a long, long time. This past year, he had a rushing grade of 96.0. Folks, the PFF scale only goes to 99.9. And it is rare that you even get a handful of elite grades over 90, let alone an entire season's worth to bump your overall grade above 95. It's unheard of, but it's exactly the kind of player that Bijan Robinson is. There were unrealistic expectations of him going into this season. Would you agree to that? I felt like there were unrealistic, and yet he lived up to those unrealistic expectations. Over 1,500 rushing yards, over 1,000 yards after contact, 105 missed tackles forced, which was an average of 0.4 per attempt, which is nuts. It's one of the highest numbers that we've had over the last half decade. 41 explosive plays of 15 yards or more. And then, of course, he added some work in the receiving game as well, which is why he is one of my favorite prospects and one of the blue chip prospects in this class. To me, he is that Christian McCaffrey type of player. Mm-hmm. He is that kind of guy who you can use as an overall offensive weapon in any way, shape, and form. You get an offensive coordinator, an offensive mind as creative as Kyle Shanahan with a player like Bijan Robinson, and you're going to see him lined up as a halfback. You're going to see him lined up as a slot wide receiver. You're going to see him in motion. You're going to see him used as a read option player. You're going to see him in the wildcat. You're going to see him utilized in every single way, shape, and form. Because that's the type of athlete that we're talking about. That's the kind of football player that we're talking about. I know I'm not breaking any news here, singing his praises. But when I think of offensive players that are my favorite, that are going to get picked in round 1, Bijan Robinson is the guy that made me smile the most and the tape that I enjoyed watching the most this past year. So had to give the king his crown in this one.
Man, I love that you did, because we are back to the discourse of, hey, it's a deep running back class. Maybe Bijan shouldn't go round 1 because you could get one in round 4. And folks, you can't get Bijan Robinson in round 4. I don't know if you can get 70% of Bijan Robinson in round 4. So is it a luxury every team can afford to take? Hell no. Over 90% of the teams in round 1 probably can't afford that luxury. But the ones that can, he's just too good, Trevor. He's too good. And in the spirit of this being the running backs podcast of Pro Football Focus, my round 2 guy is Jahmyr Gibbs.
Hey.
Who is another dude that in a deep loaded running back class with Bijan at the top and a pretty clear cut guy at the top. Bijan to me is just Sean McVay's Todd Gurley. That's what I see every time I watch him.
Sean McVay's Todd Gurley.
The monster, like when Gurley was back full health from Georgia, And at his prime of the NFL.
How many carries did he get that one season?
Oh my God, dude. He was so good for the Rams. It was like 2 or 3 years, right? Where he was not just good.
2017 and 2018.
Oh my God.
He had 279 rush attempts and then 256 rush attempts.
And 64 catches and 59 catches. I mean, that peak early season in 17.
This is the classic, if he dies, he dies kind of meme, just like absolutely giving him every single carry possible.
Over 2,000 yards in 17 for Gurley, and he came pretty dang close in 18. I think Bijan will have a season or two like that pretty easily.
Dude, those back-to-back years, 2017, 2018, he had almost 4,000 yards from scrimmage.
I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous.
The man was unhinged. All right, so what Connor is saying is Jahmyr Gibbs 4,000-yard double-digit seasons coming up.
No, that was about Bijan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Gibbs.
Oh, then I'll stand by that.
No. I see the Gurley thing is for Bijan.
Okay.
On to Gibbs, who is definitely not. He just doesn't have the stature, right? I don't know what he's going to come in at. I have him in the sheet at 5'11", 200. He doesn't look 200 pounds to me on tape. But it doesn't really matter. He gets a ton of Alvin Kamara comparisons. I see him more as Dalvin Cook every time I watch him. Not really going to get nitpicky about that. I think when people start getting, man, I think it's one of my pet peeves of draft season. I actually stopped posting as many comps as I used to and just save them for live draft coverage or podcasts and things like that. Because you tweet a player comp, and people that you would never expect out of nowhere are like, hey, asshole, this is the worst comp I've ever seen. And it's like,
he doesn't have the same shoe size as this guy.
I'm like, what did I do to you to deserve this? Just keep moving on. You don't have to interact with the tweet.
You lived. You existed.
I existed.
You typed this.
Oh, man.
The audacity.
So Jahmyr Gibbs, he will turn 21 in March. Really young player. Finished 2022.
His first beer.
Yeah, his first beer's on the way if he pleases, if he so chooses. 850 rushing yards on just 136 carries. And his ability in the receiving game, he only had 42 catches for 378 yards, but his natural ability as a receiver is just phenomenal.
I agree.
He has great feel as a runner. Tacklers do bounce off him. He doesn't look like, Godzilla out there, but tacklers bounce off of him. He's got juice to get to the outside. I am convinced that the Kamara comps sometimes come from when he wears turf tape. It's
because he looks exactly like
he kind of looks like Alvin Kamara, and he catches the football. And he's pretty good with the ball in his hands after the catch.
Right.
But as I just made fun of everybody that makes fun of player comps, I make fun of a player comp. So there we go. Natural hands. He's somebody that is a very, very explosive threat. And I think can come in and be the guy at running back despite that size. So round 2, if you're on the fence about, using that premium round 1 pick, and round 2 is still a premium asset, but you're not ready to use it for Bijan. If you're in the middle of round 2 and you need to get you're a pass happy offense that needs to utilize the running back position, Gibbs is going to be a significant high end player. I think right out of the gate. I think there's no waiting period. I know a lot of people, even James Cook, right? The Bills took him in round 2 last year, and it never felt like the utilization fully got going as a rookie. Gibbs has some similar traits to James and Dalvin Cook, and I think the waiting period for Gibbs to play will be non-existent.
I agree. Alabama's got him listed at 200 pounds. I feel like he's smaller than that, but his recruiting
190.
But his recruiting profile has him at 199, and I don't think the recruiting.
They were just wrong. They were just wrong.
No, that can't be right.
I mean, I don't actually mean that. But... Oh, this is definitely the worst pod we've ever done.
No, it's not. This is the best pod we've ever done. No, I love Jahmyr. He's great. He seems to be, I had him as RB3. I had Tank Bigsby ahead of him when we went through our early running back rankings, but he seems to be the consensus RB2, right? Wherever he's going to come off the board. Like if some team wanted to take a chance on him at the back end of round 1, which I don't think is likely, but he seems to be the only one who also has a chance at round 1 on top of Bijan Robinson. I think more likely than not, he is that second round selection like you've highlighted here on this show. And I do think he's ultimately the next running back off the board once Bijan comes off. So he brings you a lot of athletic ability. I wonder if he's going to get a little bit bigger in the NFL. Like, I wonder if they're going to try to throw 5-10 pounds on him and like just truly make him a monster.
I think so, especially when they're that young, right? He's not 23 or even 22 yet. Like he's a young guy.
Yeah.
He's going to get a lot bigger and stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. When I watch him on tape, he looks a little bit smaller, but then when you go to Alabama and you look at his picture bio, he's doing the thing that, we all do when we're in pictures where he's got the traps flexed, he's got the neck back. He's got like the neck. Yeah. He's like,
I don't have it in me anymore.
He's like,
there it is.
There it is. His photo.
So for those that listening to this on a run right now, they're just like, what the hell have I gotten myself into?
They know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, if they are sitting here listening to this audio only, I guarantee you that they just sat up in their chair or wherever they are and they just flexed their traps and tried to do exactly what I was talking about. Don't act like the people don't know. Don't act like we're fools out here. People know exactly what's going on. Anyways, all right. So my second round guy, I'm going to go with John Schmitz, the interior offensive lineman from Minnesota. Again,
how can you not? How can you not?
The same way that you talked about Peter Skoronski. No, I don't think John Schmitz is going to be out here playing tackle. But just a good offensive lineman that could play any three of the interior offensive line spots. He played center for Minnesota. He was a multi-year starter. I think he was a 4-year starter for them. And he's got so much experience. He's got so much confidence. I would even say that the area of his game that maybe I would complain about the most is sometimes he gets a little over aggressive, right? Like sometimes he's trying to make a punch on a defensive lineman a little bit too hard or a little bit too aggressive. And
he loves the knockout.
Of course he does.
He wants the TKO. He's not letting it end by decision to the refs.
That's the mentality you want, especially at center in the middle of your offensive line. So especially from what I saw from him in Mobile, Alabama, getting to see him up close, just the nastiness that he plays with. I didn't feel like he took it over the line at any point, but he was definitely somebody who, he wasn't going to take any shit from anybody. It didn't matter who was going up against him. And it didn't matter like when the whistle was being blown, whether it was at the beginning of the rep, whether it was at the end, whatever. Like he was going to get that last little, I don't even want to say like,
I am the whistle.
But he was going to basically play through it and say like, okay, I'm going to be the last one of the two of us to give the effort on this rep. And that's just the mentality that he plays with. Like I said, I think he's got that guard center versatility to him. So he's just a true versatile interior offensive lineman. I feel like he's just a multi-year starter at the NFL level. And that's not a guarantee that you get in the second and third rounds. And so I think that he is a player who I would gravitate towards somewhere in round 2 because I would want a guy with that kind of mentality, that kind of ability on the interior part of my offensive line. So there we go. I got John Schmitz as my second round guy.
Sign me right up. I will absolutely take a chair at that table. Schmitz is he's a killer, and he has such in this era, I think a unique build for a center. There's just not a lot of centers that are that dense anymore. It's become a smaller position by the years, and he moves just as well where he has the size, he has the movement. My round 3 guy, I won't spend as long because I would encourage everybody to watch the wide receiver rankings where I got to talk about this guy for a while, but it's Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. He's my round 3 guy. I think that the ankle injury this year and the fact that he might not be this, off the walls kind of tester probably kick him outside of the first 2 rounds. But when you just turn on the tape, when you look at this wide receiver class, thirsting for somebody with size and physicality to take the reins, there's just not. Quentin Johnson, we could talk about, until the end of time, but it's one guy. It's one guy. There has to be some other bigger wide receivers that can play at the next level. And that's Tillman for me. The way he plucks the ball out of the air, the way he challenges DBs, he knows how to use his frame to shield. Insanely competitive. There's a fire in this guy that I loved watching him play. I think he'll be able to handle run blocking duties on the outside, which we know is so important as the outside zone continues to just take off and not take off in the NFL. It's here and it's here to stay. Mm-hmm. So Tillman for me was my guy in round 3 that when I did this exercise, Trevor, especially for defense, because you're picking rounds. And after round one, you could poke holes in every single guy.
Sure.
I tried to look at guys in a class that'll hold value, right? Like Jack Campbell's in a class of linebackers that nobody really knows what they're doing, but he does. When you look at trying to go back to Tillman, he's a physical wide receiver that can handle the possession game and can continue to allow your offense to be bigger personnel. You're not just trotting out a ton of 5'9", 180-pound wide receivers. I tried to find guys that offer some kind of physicality profile that this class lacks.
Yeah, no, it's and it's a good shout out. Like you mentioned, this class has been a really good exercise, I think, for sifting through
flaws.
No, how do I want to say this? There's so much versatility at so many different positions now. And you're almost blurring the lines between the size, speed, strength combination that used to be a prerequisite for a certain position, like linebacker or like wide receiver, like running back, like cornerback, like safety, whatever it is. Shoot, even defensive line and offensive line as well. And you're getting some of these hybrid players who might not look the part, but they bring you a different element of playing that position. Then you get guys like Jack Campbell. Then you get guys like Cedric Tillman. Then you get these guys that are just like, boom, I know what I am getting. I know what I am getting out of this player. I can rely on it. And this is somebody that I continually lean on. So I know that you were big on Cedric Tillman. When we were going through the wide receiver episode, I read a handful of comments actually on that video where people were like, hell yeah, like I like Cedric Tillman as well. And this kind of encourages me to be hyped up in what I'm seeing, that it's not just the fact that nobody's really talking about him because he's not a good football player. It's because, we're talking about other wide receivers, and maybe the injury, of course, goes into it that he had this past year that gave him some lack of production. So like to shout out on Cedric Tillman. I'll stick with Tennessee for my guy. I'm going to go with Hendon Hooker as my favorite third round prospect here.
Beauty.
Really good quarterback who had a really good year this past year. And there's reasons why he's going to be a third round pick, right? One, you're probably not getting anything out of him next year because he's recovering from an ACL tear. So outside of him even having a rookie year, which you would probably not want him to start right away anyways, he's recovering from that ACL injury. So you're probably not getting him at all next year. And the big worry with that is he's going to be 25 years old by the time draft day rolls around. And if you're already taking away his rookie season, then best case scenario, he's 26. But if you're not drafting him necessarily to be this multi-contract guy, take a chance on him in the third round. He's a good quarterback. He almost had an elite passing grade for us this past year. He had 16 big-time throws to just 4 turnover-worthy plays. He had 27 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. And his completion percentage was above 75%, which is exactly what you want. He's somebody who was not afraid to pull the trigger in so many different situations, give his guys a chance to go get the ball. And most importantly, when you watched him in Heupel's offense, yes, you can say to yourself, Tennessee manufactured a lot of guys that were really open. But at the same time, if you look at Hooker independently within that offense, he was so confident. And that confident quarterback play, if you can tell yourself, we're going to draft him, we're going to let him just learn the playbook the entire first year, and then we might give him a legitimate shot to start that next year after that, you might get that confident quarterback back. Now, obviously, he would physically have to be there. He'd have to have the confidence with his leg recovering from that ACL injury. But between the ears, like a master of the offense, getting out there, getting different reps, being able to play in the preseason, taking his lumps probably early on in his sophomore season, and then really catching fire from that point on, maybe you hit it big with this dude. Maybe you hit a home run. And as we know, if you hit it big at quarterback, that's what matters most. That can make all the difference in the world. He is absolutely a flyer that I would take in this draft. I got him going as one of my favorite players in the third round. I wonder where he ends up going. I think most people would tell you that they'd feel more safe about him being a day 3 pick. I'm just not so sure the NFL is going to totally wait on that. Because from what we heard, the interviews have been fantastic with him when he was in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I've got to think that that's a trend that's going to continue if that's true at the Combine. And I think somebody's really going to fall in love with this dude enough to take him in the third round. So I got Hendon Hooker.
I think so too. I think he goes in the third round, or he should be going in the third round. And Trevor, it's interesting when the conversations start with, well, he got hurt this year after a great year and he's old. It's like, okay, but he's good. He's a good, accurate quarterback
Right.
that is seasoned. And man, if he was healthy, and I know that kind of makes the point, insignificant, he's more ready to play the position at the NFL level than Will Levis and Anthony Richardson right now. I can confidently say that.
He's absolutely a second-round pick, even with his age, if he doesn't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, it's a shame. The Senior Bowl really needed him, honestly, when you go back to that week out there.
I would have loved for him to be there for sure.
It really needed him. So that brings me to round 4.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I go with Zach Charbonnet. And this one's kind of interesting because running back can get a little, interesting where round 3 to 5, you're surprised. You'll have a guy that you thought was a day 2 lock and he falls to round 5. You have a guy that you thought was a late day 3 running back and he gets taken in round 3. So I'll put the disclaimer on Charbonnet that he could easily sneak into day 2. He could easily go later than this. We just don't know right now with the middle of this running back class. I know we've been high on Charbonnet since the summer. His size, number one, his size profile that he has. I always go back to what I said over summer that, it's funny that he transferred from Michigan because he truly looks like a Big Ten running back playing in the wrong conference.
He does.
It just doesn't, when you see him, you're like, what are you doing back there in the UCLA uniform? Like 6'1", 220.
Yeah.
He had a 93.8 PFF grade this year. I mean, just dominated. He had almost 1,400 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns. He forced 52 missed tackles. He had 4.2 yards after contact per attempt, 44 explosive runs. He also caught 37 passes for 17 first downs. This is a big dude that can catch the ball, that can run through people with power. He doesn't have that top end gear, but yards 5 to 12, he is phenomenal. And the fact that he can catch the ball and the fact that he has this frame to be coached up in pass pro and consistently create his own yards. I mean, Bijan deserves all the attention. I went over how much I love Gibbs. Charbonnet, I think, is another guy in this class that has one of the highest floors at his position. He should be a really good NFL runner that comes in pro ready. I like the thought of A-Chain more because of the speed ceiling. Charbonnet is the better running back today by a pretty significant step. I think that's the highest compliment I can give Charbonnet in this class.
Oh, you don't got to tell me. I had Charbonnet ranked well ahead of Vaughn A-Chain. I like Charbonnet a lot. And in fact, I'd tell you that Charbonnet is probably closer to, I would tell you that I think Charbonnet is closer to a second-round pick than he is a fourth-round pick. But ultimately, I do think that he's probably a third-round pick. However, I'm not going to nitpick you on this too much because you gave a shout-out to him. And I'm glad you gave a shout out to him because he is one of my favorite players in this class too. So you having him as a fourth rounder, I got no issue with that. I think his range is anywhere from the late second to somewhere in the early fourth round, anywhere from Charbonnet. So I'll give it to you. I'm gonna stick with Michael Wilson as my fourth round guy here. I've got him in the fourth round simply because of the medicals, right? He suffered a leg injury in 2020, re-injured it for 2021, had a foot injury in 2022. And that's a funny reference for everybody who watched the, was it the wide receiver ranking episode that we did?
It was the 3-round mock drafts of the 5 teams that have first round picks. Yes, so Michael Wilson will be every mock draft simulator's pick in round 7 till the end of time. It's like it's the sneakers pick.
The injury is the reason why that you could definitely see him as a day 3 player and why he probably is ultimately going to be a day 3 player. But man, when he's been out there and healthy, whether it's been at Stanford or whether it was at the Senior Bowl, he showed that he understands how to win at the position. I know I repeat that phrase a lot, but it's just the best way to encapsulate everything that he does well. He understands releases. He gets how to attack cornerbacks' blind spots. He knows how to get them turned around at the snap. And when he gets into his routes for them to flip their hips the wrong way. And then all of a sudden he's making the corner play catch up the entire rest of the route. He gets how to box guy. He knows how to box guys out, veer his routes a certain way to where, he's maybe leaning a little bit more towards the sideline, getting his shoulder, even with the cornerback, and then boom, a little subtle move of the arm while he plants his foot and goes back inside, all of a sudden creating those 2 yards of separation to then the ball arrives and he's able to make a clean catch. That's the type of wide receiver that Michael Wilson is. I think for a guy who is 6'1.5", 215 pounds, a guy who is dense, a thicker wide receiver who could play on the line of scrimmage, has that strength profile to his game. He also moves very well. The footwork is really nice. I think he's precise when he's changing in and out of his routes, whether it's, like I said, deep down the field or in the short and intermediate stuff too. I think he's a really nice, complete wide receiver, even though I think that the overall athleticism maybe a little lower than it is for other guys. It's why I probably don't project him as a, even when healthy, wide receiver 1 at the next level, but a really good wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 player who I'd love to get at the beginning of day 3, even with the medicals. I would love to take a chance on him because when he's healthy and out there for you, I think he could be a difference maker.
Oof. Yeah. I mean, listen, no argument from me on his physical profile. It's just all going to come down to his medical information, because it goes back to, the situation with Tillman where it's like, man, can some bigger wide receivers that have these long striding downfield speed and can win at the catch point take over at some point in this draft class or get some buzz for this draft class? And that's definitely him. So I'll close this out with my round 5 guy, sticking with wide receivers, and that's Marvin Mims from Oklahoma.
Nice.
I mean, a true forgotten player in this class. He has played 3 years at Oklahoma. He is one of the rare, he's a true junior entering this draft class. I think he's still only 20 years old. He's had some big moments for Oklahoma throughout his college career. He's caught 20 touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. All 3 years there, he went over 600 yards. He had 610 yards 2020 as a freshman, over 700 yards 2021, and then over 1,000 this final year. So he's been highly productive inside, outside wide receiver. He is light. He's probably about 5'10", 182 pounds. I wonder if he could bulk up for the combine. I think that would really, really help him. This dude can play, Trevor. I mean, he could do everything for you too. He can win down the field. He can win in the middle of the field. He was insanely productive when he was a Texas high school football player coming out that year, and that only carried over instantly to Oklahoma. He could be a special teams guy as well. Mims has just gotten no recognition in this draft. He's just kind of lumped in with this round 3 to 6 wide receiver group. But he's somebody that, I mean, even as a freshman, when you really see things clicking in that offense, he's somebody that can play bigger than his size. So I really like Mims. This is actually, out of all the players, and it's good I saved this one for last, counting the defense show, this is the Brown projection that I think will finally swing back the right way by the time we get to April. I think Mims will be viewed more as a round 3 to 4 player, but right now he's sitting in the middle of day 3.
You talked about him a little bit on the wide receiver episode, and he's a dude who I still have to watch. So I can't totally give my opinions on him because I haven't watched him yet. So that is somebody who I'm looking forward to watching as we kind of go through the rest of our wide receiver rankings a little bit later when we get out of the combine. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching him.
Beauty.
All right, my last
guy. Who you got last?
This is the guy that I was glad that we did this exercise because I don't get to talk about him enough. This is my boy, Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State.
There it is.
I love Deuce Vaughn, man.
Yeah.
Look, I love all 5'6", 180 pounds of this Kansas State running back. He's such a fun player. And look, I get it. The size limitations, whether it's a strength profile, whether it's the fact that he just doesn't have the long strides to really be able to cover too much ground. I think he's as athletic. Let me put it to you this way. For a player who is 5'6", 180 pounds, I don't know if he could do anything better. I really don't. Unless, you would say like, oh, a 5'6" guy, you'd want him to run like a 4.3 40-yard dash. But you don't have the stride length for that, I think he's fast. I think he's athletic for a player that is of his size. He's just physically limited in what he could do. But of the players that you would have of this type of size, I don't know what better Deuce Vaughn could do for you. And I think that you've seen that over the last couple of years with his production, back-to-back over 1,000 yards on these 2 seasons for Kansas State, and he's so much fun, man. I think that his tape is so unique. He'll break tackles when you think he's got no business breaking tackles. He'll shake guys in the open field. He's even got some decent long speed to him to break some home run balls off. There were a handful of those in his Kansas State tape over the last couple of years. He's got really soft hands. He's a great receiver. Unfortunately, you can't really put him out there on third down situations because he's 5'6", 180 pounds. He can't pass block. But If you ever get him out there in a certain situation where you got to dump the ball off to him, little screen, little something out to the flat, little slant route, little Texas route, whatever it is, he'll put it on an NFL linebacker. I fully believe that. He'll be able to get open for you. And I just love his game, man. He's so well-rounded. He's such a great dude. I mean, I had the chance to sit down and interview him for a feature. Loved to getting to know him a little bit better. Unbelievably determined. Has such a great outlook on football, on life, on everything. I asked him, obviously, you ask him about his size, and he goes, look, of course, I think my size comes with disadvantages, but I choose to look at the advantages that I sometimes have and how, because I am smaller, I can get through the holes in between my two blockers when other running backs, maybe they couldn't. Shoot, I remember there was a specific play. What game was this the Alabama game? It was either the
Small
Alabama
strike zone.
It was either the Alabama game or the TCU game where his offensive lineman was locked and engaged with a defensive player. And Deuce Vaughn literally ran in between them and their arms as they were extended, blocking and locked and engaged with one another. He literally ran in between them because he could, because his body allowed him to do ridiculous. That. So, that's what we're talking about with this guy, just being able to get through the smallest window of light when it comes to these spaces. You mentioned, small tackling range or small tackling box as well. I also think that him being of smaller stature and the strength that he brings with it gives him great contact balance. So Deuce Vaughn, one of my favorite players in this class. Had to give him a shout out. I'd pick him in the 5th round. Absolutely.
He's so awesome. I mean, I think the closest comp we can get for him is like Danny Woodhead. That's the level of size we're at.
What was Woodhead?
Woodhead was, I think, the same size. I just had his mock draftable open. Hang on one sec.
5'7.5".
Yeah, he tested really well, though.
Whoa,
Danny Woodhead.
Woodhead was 197.
Yeah.
My guy was yoked.
Yeah, he got absolutely yoked.
Oh,
these are pro day numbers. Keep that in mind.
Okay. Yeah,
Keep that in mind. They are pro day numbers, so take them with a grain of salt. But he ran a 4.38. It's the only reason he even got a shot in the NFL.
Right, sure.
So, yeah, that's the closest I can get. Dude, we love Deuce Vaughn. He was a big part of our summer running backs preview, I remember. Yes. And I will be rooting for Deuce Vaughn no matter what team he goes to.
There we go. Those are our 5 favorite players each that we have for the first 5 rounds of the 2023 NFL Draft. Let us know on YouTube what you guys think, who some of your favorite offensive players are for each round of the draft. It's just a good excuse to give a shout out to some of the players that don't get enough love. So hit us up in the YouTube comments. Subscribe to the new channel if you haven't yet. YouTube.com/@NFL Stock Exchange. Hit us up on Twitter @Tampa Bay Trey, @Connor J. Rogers. The same thing on Instagram as well. Connor, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, man. As you are listening or watching this, you are off on a boat. Good for you. This was much needed, and we will be back firing on all cylinders next week.
We will indeed, because the week that I get back is Combine week, baby.
Yeah.
We're going to be locked and loaded. I cannot wait to get to the Combine, to get to Indianapolis, learn all the intel, give you guys all the information that we possibly can that week. It's going to be a great time. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Connor Rogers. Thank you guys so much for listening to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. We'll see you next time.